Hi, everybody. We'll give folks just another minute to join us.
So they heard us talking.
Welcome, welcome. If you're just joining, we will be recording the session and recording is underway. If you
If you
cannot,
cannot,
if you cannot see a big friendly image of a community and a slide that says factory produced housing lift set aside, please raise your hand if you cannot see that. Fabulous. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Britt McLean. I am an affordable housing policy analyst here at OHCS in the Affordable Rental Housing Division. You're going to see some familiar faces today, including Talia Concravis, the Assistant Director of Home Ownership, and Caroline Murphy, our outcomes analyst in the Affordable Rental Housing Division as well. We probably will recognize a lot of your names, a lot of your faces from the advisory committee that wrapped up in December, and the recommendations that came out in January. Let's see. I'm reading your mind. Yes, these slides, everything you see will be available after the session, as well as the recording. So fret not. Please hold your questions to the end. We will probably answer your question, and then we will have an open Q&A at the end. And then just right before we get into things, please make sure you're muted. Okay, here we go. Just a little level setting. We all know Representative Marsh is a champion for factory produced housing. She is a chief champion of this legislation, and we could not agree with her more that factory produced housing, built housing is the future, and we need it right now. So today's agenda, we're going to do a little bit of background and level setting. How did we get here? Let's see. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Talia, for handling the entries. Great. Then we'll go into the deadlines. Then we'll go into the application workbook and the selection form. Those are the application materials. Then we'll talk about eligibility, the scoring criteria, and the portfolio balancing dimension. Then we'll go into some FAQs and then your questions, and we'll give you some answers. Anything that we can't answer today, we will post in an FAQ on our webpage. And then we will walk through a couple of resources that are available to you right this second. So let's get started. OHCS, we serve Oregonians at area median incomes from about 30% to 80%. There are some exceptions to that. There are different programs that have different AMIs, but AMIs are more than just a number to us. These are people, they're teachers, they are single mothers, they are wildfire survivors, and we know that you share the priority with us that these folks, that everyone deserves healthy housing, and that these folks are no exception. Okay, how did we get here today? During the 2025 long legislative session, a session that probably a lot of you remember, a bicameral bipartisan group of legislators passed House Bill 3145. It defined factory produced housing. It required OHCS to set aside $25 million in our LIFT in one-time resources for exclusively factory produced housing units. It established the Factory Produced Housing Advisory Committee that I mentioned before, and it required the network of affordable housing to compile and synthesize feedback from the advisory committee into a set of non-binding recommendations. And then it requires OHCS to consider those non-binding recommendations from NOAA and the advisory committee. The factory produced housing definition in the bill, it cites two statutes, 446.003 and then 197A.015. But in layperson's terms, that is housing that is produced through offsite construction of housing or housing components. That's an important piece. And that includes manufactured dwellings, manufactured homes, defined in that statute, as well as prefabricated structures. We hope that if you have questions on eligibility in terms of factory produced housing in the definition, that you will reach out to some folks that we will, the contact information we'll share with you at the end here. But we want to try to avoid determining whether or not something is a factory produced housing project in this meeting. Okay, the goals of the set aside. We all know that factory produced housing is already eligible for affordable rental housing resources and for homeownership resources, but this really was intended to demonstrate the power, the effectiveness, the cost savings of factory produced housing specifically. So this gives us an opportunity to try new approaches as an agency, as a state, and then we're going to take that experience and help promote the growth of the industry in Oregon that we as an agency really believe in. We're going to create technical assistance for and with the project portfolio that we end up selecting, and then that will guide future factory produced housing projects that we see in our pipelines. The Factory Produced Housing Advisory Committee was fantastic. There were 5 public committee meetings. Those are posted on our website. 27 members from across the industry, across government, several partners, lots of really good expertise in the room. They put together a set of criteria recommendations to OHCS that we received in January. And then the technical assistance planning work for the selected cohort, the winning, the projects that are awarded, basically. That planning is going on right now, and then it will be implemented this summer. So that's just a look ahead to what that advisory committee's charge will continue to be. But it's finished for now. It's paused for now. Okay, next slide. Oop, I'm sorry. There we go. Timeline and application deadlines. We wanted to make this crystal clear for folks so that there was no ambiguity. Some of these deadlines have already passed, but we wanted to make sure that you're aware of them. So the committee convened from October to December last year. We got the recommendations at the end of January. The OHCS application window for the set aside is open right now, and and we're holding this info session today right here. So you are here, and then the application window will close on the 6th of April. We will evaluate and select projects during April and May, and then we hope to have the final cohort of projects receiving the factory produced set aside in May. Okay, who can apply? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually going to pass things over to our fearless leader, Talia Concrevis, the Assistant Director of Home Ownership. Talia, take it away.
Thanks, Britt. So who can apply? You may all be on the call right now thinking, is this funding for me? So this is just a really condensed list. If you fill out the application, it will have many prompts for you that tell you whether your project is eligible or not. But broadly, developers planning to build new affordable rental or homeownership units. So, this is for the new construction of either homeownership or rental units, and they must obviously be using factory produced components. So that includes volumetric, modular, manufactured housing, and all the kind of squishy categories in between. The applicants must be able to meet LIFT program requirements. So that's a huge one here. Again, the application will prompt you to make sure you're able to meet many of the LIFT program requirements, but if you're not familiar with LIFT, we urge you to reach out to either the TA team under rental or the homeownership team. We're not changing requirements with LIFT because LIFT has always been able to support factory produced housing, but this factory produced housing selection is more of a gateway into funding for LIFT rather than new funding and new requirements. It's still kind of our same program, just a new way to get entry into accessing the funding. So selected applicants must be willing and able to successfully complete the ORCA or the NOFA, depending on which type of project you have, that application process. So just to double clarify, if you're chosen through the selection process, if you fill out this application, submit it by April 6th, and we select you to be part of this cohort, you still need to make it through completing your ORCA and NOFA application to get the funds, to get a reservation of funding. And then just as long as, while you're thinking about, is this funding right for me? The application you'll see asks for some metrics that your project is relatively shovel ready. So this isn't for projects that might be ready a couple years down the line. It's not for seedling ideas. It's for projects that you've been thinking about doing some due diligence and feasibility work towards, and you know it's going to be a good fit for funding, a good fit for receiving subsidy, and ready to move forward within the next year. Go to the next slide. And I think the next question is how to apply. So I think Britt will put a link to our Factory Produced Housing Initiative website page. That should be your home base for this application. It has a link to all the next 3 steps. So if you go to that first page, then you will have access to all the application components. But the application has 2 pieces. An Excel workbook and a Smartsheet form. And so before filling out either of those, we urge you to review the application guidance and scoring rubric. There's a link to that up on our website. And then, and that will give you a better picture of what we're looking for in your application. It has guidance on many of the fields that you'll fill out when you're filling out the application. And then next, you do you can decide how you want to do the application, but we're recommending fill out the Factory Produced Housing Workbook, which has some really asks for some concrete data on your application, and we'll walk through that in a second. And then fill out that project selection form, which is a Smartsheet. It asks for some narratives, and Caroline will walk through that in a bit. So those are the 4 steps. They're relatively quick. We've tried to keep this application low touch because the selected projects will have to go through that longer work of filling out the application through the ORCA or NOFA down the line. So you can go to the next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the Factory Produced Housing Workbook, which is the first component or a component of the application. And so this is an Excel worksheet. It might look slightly similar to some other application workbooks if you've gotten OHCS funding before. It has 4 tabs. The first tab is general project information, so just real basic information about your project. The blue cells mean that you need to select a drop down, and the white cells you need to fill in. The blue cells here in this tab, if you select home ownership, it will load, and also geography, it will load the subsidies that you're eligible for, so you can reference that as you're filling this out to make sure that your lift request is an actually eligible lift request and you're not requesting a number out of the blue. And same if you select rental and the geography, it will load with the subsidy structure that fits your project. And so you know you're plugging in the right number. So the next tab is development experience, and it has 2 different tables. Again, this might look familiar to you. It just has some tweaks so we can learn more about your factory produced housing experience. So at the top, we'll ask you to list who's on your development team. You don't have to have everyone identified, but the bolded categories, we do require that they are identified. And this is how we'll also assess what experience your team has with factory produced housing. And then share the development project history. We're looking to see that you've completed a project of similar scope and size. It doesn't have to be a factory produced housing project, but we just want to know that this isn't totally new to you, but there is a place to indicate if that past project was a factory produced housing project. So again, the blued ones are where you'll do a drop down. The white cells are where you'll enter in, and we don't expect that you'll fully fill out this table, but left the option that you can fill in as many cells as you want or need to. You can go to the next slide. The development schedules should look familiar to those that have done a LIFT application before or OHCS application. And just note there are some places that There are lines specifically for homeownership and lines specifically for rental projects. So you don't need to fill in the rental lines if you're a homeownership project and vice versa. But we are looking to see that your development timeline meets a lot of our benchmarks for regular lift projects. And then also one scoring criteria is the speed at which you'll complete your project. So we're looking to see that reflected in the development schedule and then also in some of your narrative questions. So this is relatively straightforward here. And then the last tab is sources and uses. And so we're not asking for a full-blown pro forma, but we are looking to see that you have identified the sources that you're going to need for your project and identified the large categories of uses and that they balance. And again, also there's some specifics that we want to see related to what amount of funds is going, or what proportion is going to be spent on factory produced components, what proportion is going to be spent on specialized materials such as mass timber or environmentally friendly materials or climate resilient materials that will help provide some evidence for some of the narrative questions that you answer in the selection form. So pretty high level budget here, but also informative for us in providing backup documentation or backup information for your application, and then also for us for data tracking. And just so this is the high level. If your project is selected, you will be required to fill out like a very detailed pro forma and also provide evidence of your assumptions that you've built into your budget. So this is just kind of the starting point. And then if you're selected, you'll have to do more of that justification and detail later. So that's the workbook. It's relatively straightforward. And now I'll pass it over to Caroline Murphy to talk through the Smartsheet form.
Thanks, Talia. Hey, folks, just want to take a moment and say it's super exciting to see so many folks join us online as well and learn about this. Just basking in that as I keep seeing folks pop in. So we'll get started around the Smartsheet selection form. Just a few pieces regarding how Smartsheet operates. Smartsheet does not save your answers. If you work on this form, over the course of a couple of days or a week or so, it does not save anything. So really encourage folks to have a separate document where you are answering those questions. And once you're ready to submit, you are moving those over into the form. Another piece that would be helpful that Talia alluded to earlier, a lot of the questions are tied to what we have in the workbook form. And so filling out the workbook concurrently with your selection form would probably be a wise move. In our selection form, we have broken up the questions into a couple different types. We've got our basic question selection. You'll determine if you're home ownership or rental. And if you are going to submit a project that does cover both, we ask that you submit 2 forms addressing both the home ownership side and the rental side. Then we've got our scored criteria section, which is focusing on cost savings, time savings, replicability, and materials. Talia will give us a little bit more information on that a bit later when we talk about our rubric. And then attestations and links and other resources. We do link our workbook and the integrity certification in the Smartsheet form as well if folks are having a hard time finding it. Another note just regarding OHCS funding and pairing and making sure everything is clicking together well. For folks who have already applied for 9% LIHTC or LIHTC in general, there is a lift cap of $3 million for funds. And so just wanting to make sure folks know that that does apply for any kind of lift. And our applications, just to reiterate what Britt shared earlier, does close on April 6th at 5 p.m. I am ready to move to the next slide, Britt, thanks. Okay, so our LIFT program materials and attestations. LIFT program materials are LIFT manuals, including the homeownership specific and ARH specific manuals will apply to this. That will come into play in the NOFA and ORCA processes, but there is an attestation that y'all with good faith will be able to move through those processes. So really wanted to make sure we're highlighting those resources for you to read through and become familiar with as you're exploring these funds. And then our attestations do also include some other standards and pieces that are important to us tied to readiness and ability to meet the requirements in relation to timelines. And that is all for this slide. If you could go to the next. And then finally, our application workbook, the Excel document, as well as the OHCS integrity form. Making sure that that form is signed and filled out to the best of your ability would be fantastic. If you have any issues with that form, again, please reach out to those contacts that we've dropped in the chat and will also be included in this PowerPoint as well as on our website. If you have any issues with the application, we also have an application team who is able to give some support there. And that is all for the application. I'm ready to move and hand it over to Talia for the rubric review.
Great, thanks, Caroline. So you'll fill out the application, those two components, and once you submit it, it will be in our system and we'll wait until the deadline of the application window closes, so April 6th. And then what will happen is that OHCS will begin reviewing applications, and we will look at a number of different criteria. So I just wanted to back up before I go into all this criteria. As Britt mentioned at the beginning, we've been convening this factory produce, or NOAA and Echo Northwest, and then OHCS has been part of the planning team, have been convening this factory produced housing advisory committee. And so many of you are on this call, which is great. And they put together these recommendations for the criteria, which informed the questions in our application and then how we plan to evaluate those questions. So the rubric that you can access, Britt already posted it in the chat, is gives you that overview of how your responses will be looked at. Will they be pass fail? Will they be scored? And so all of the questions fall into basically 3 buckets with a little kind of guidance bucket for OHCS at the end. But the first is project baseline eligibility. So a lot of the initial questions that you'll answer in the Smartsheet form help us and help you know if your project meets really basic LIFT requirements. So like, are you able to meet the affordability period requirements? Will you serve the right threshold of income, residents, or residents with the right threshold of income, and that basic stuff. So there's a few questions that have skip logic based on whether you're a rental or home ownership project. So that should guide you as well as guide us to know if your project meets our first level of eligibility criteria. And then after that is the project readiness and feasibility criteria. And that really seeks to see, going back to that, are you an eligible applicant? Is your project shovel ready, ready to go? Can you meet our timelines? So you'll see in the scoring rubric and guidance document, just some basic guidance around that. And again, that will be pass fail. That's information that OHCS will review. It's pretty straightforward. Some will be explained in a narrative. Some we can just see some from your looking at your development schedule and saying, okay, looks good. And then there's the project prioritization criteria. And this is the scored criteria. So this is really kind of the heart of what the Factory Produced Housing Advisory Committee helped us figure out. And they, so some of it to you all that were part of that committee should look familiar. Some of it has been tweaked a bit since going through a lot of different internal processes. And so this is how we will rank the projects if they meet all our minimum thresholds beforehand. And I'll go through that a little bit more in depth. And then at the end, we'll come out with a rank set of projects, but we want to make sure that we're funding a diversity of projects. So OHCS will apply some portfolio balancing criteria, and I'll go through that in a second. So I think we're ready to go to the next slide. And again, you can, if you want to pull up the rubric as I go through this, there's 6 scored criteria questions, or actually it might be 7 scored criteria questions. And here we have what we're looking for in the strongest answer. So what will earn you the most points. So the first one is we're looking to see that the project advances the factory produced housing industry in Oregon by demonstrating cost savings. And I won't read this, but we're looking to see that you've clearly explained what's in your sources and uses tab. So any assumptions built in that influence your cost savings. You're showing us from either like data from past projects that weren't factory produced housing or were factory produced housing, or industry benchmarks that you bring in to show how it compares to a stick-built project. And then it shows that we're looking at the scale of savings and just also the evidence that you provide that there will be savings. And so I will make a note that, so that's kind of the description of how we'll rank or evaluate the strongest response. That's the 6-point answer, this description up here. This one category, it's our highest scoring category, but it also uniquely has a way, if you don't feel like you're demonstrating really strong cost savings, this criteria has a way to gain back some points, because what we heard from a lot of the factory produced housing advisory committee is it's too soon to show cost savings. This industry is young in Oregon. We're still investing in it. And it's going to take time. We need to reach scale before we're showing cost savings. And so one way to gain back points in this category is by explaining or demonstrating that during this project you'll be utilizing some sort of technology or process that's maybe new to you, or helping you reach scale, and that this new technology or process is aiding you in the future to demonstrating cost savings. So it doesn't have to be in this current project, but maybe you're employing something that will help you realize those cost savings down the line. So that's an opportunity to gain back some points if there's not the most tangible evidence of cost savings now as compared to a stick-built project. And then the next one we're looking at is time savings. So you'll write a narrative, and we'll also look at your development schedule showing that your project advances the factory produced housing industry by demonstrating time savings and efficiencies in the overall development schedule. So a strong application will show will explain any assumptions in your development schedule tab. You'll provide, similar to the response above, you'll provide a meaningful comparison data to show how this compares to typical stick-built project durations, and you'll also describe how using factory produced components creates efficiencies in your overall project. Because here we're looking not just at the factory production timeline, but your overall project development schedule. And so if your factory production timeline is really quick, but your overall timeline is still the same as compared to a stick-built project, that's not necessarily demonstrating cost savings, or time savings. So we want to see just how do all those pieces fit together to result in time savings in the overall project. The next category is replicability. So the project demonstrates that it will strengthen factory produced housing industry in Oregon by making advancements in replicability. Here's your chance to show a little creativity in how you're building in opportunities for replicability in your project. So this is a very narrative-based question. And so we want to hear really anything tangible that you're doing that will lead to furthering the industry down the line. So are there specific assets or playbooks or templates or shareable designs that you're creating to showcase the replicability of your project? And does that apply just to your company or your organization? Will it be available across the broader industry? So, a high scoring response will show that that the replicability factors really transfer across the industry. But again, there's skilled scoring for the responses. If you go to the next slide, the other ones are a little more straightforward. Well, this is the next kind of broad scoring category. So we just wrote materials up here, but this is actually a longer question that lumps a few things in with it. So the materials question asks how your project advances the factory-produced housing industry in Oregon by using A, non-traditional materials, including mass timber, and or materials with strong environmental performance, such as low carbon, low emitting, energy efficient materials, and or materials that support climate resilience, such as fire resistance or earthquake readiness. So we're looking for 3 different categories of materials, and you don't have to show that you're doing all of them. If you provide an example of one of them, or however many apply to your project, we want to hear about material specifications, the coverage information. So not just like I plan to use this, but this makes up 80% of my project. And these are the performance benefits compared to mainstream materials and the impact that they'll have down the line for residents or for the environment, or for the field. So we just want to hear how you're utilizing any or all of those categories of materials and the evidence backing it. Okay, and then the last 3 are relatively straightforward. If you're an Oregon-based manufacturer, you will get up to 3 points. If there's multiple manufacturers involved in your project, then if one of them is Oregon-based, you'll get 2 points. So, a little bit of a scale. Look at the rubric; it will tell you exactly how it works. And then same with the Oregon sponsor, or the sponsor for the project. So the main applicant, if they're Oregon-based, you get some extra points, those 2 points. And then one of the minimum threshold criteria is that you have at least 2 people on your team that have experience with factory produced housing. Or sorry, maybe it is just 1. But this one, we're giving you extra points the more experience that your team has. So this isn't, these last 3 are not a narrative response. We'll just be able to look at your factory produced housing workbook and be able to award you the points or not. So those are straightforward. The first 4 are very heavily narrative based, and we'll look between your workbook information and the narrative to award points. So that's how the scored criteria will work, and we'll have multiple reviewers, some external experts as well as internal OHCS reviewers looking at your scored responses, and we'll average those scores to be able to get a final score for your project. And then so you'll go through the scoring. That's how we'll evaluate the applications. And then the next thing that OHCS will do, so this isn't any action on your part, but we have some priorities set by the Factory Produced Housing Advisory Group, set internally, to bring about a diversity of this cohort of projects, because we don't want to just fund all Portland projects, say, or all one specific type of project. So this allows us to, this kind of puts up the guardrails so that we come up with something that's a little bit more diverse, and so it means that it's not necessarily true that the highest ranking projects will immediately get funded because we need to put them through this project balancing criteria. So the criteria is that we fund a minimum of 3 projects. The bill mandates that we fund no more than 5 projects. So somewhere in that small window of projects, 3 to 5 will be funded. No more than 2 projects per manufacturer or sponsor. And then we'll also look at geographic distribution. So we're working to have 1 project in 2 out of the following 3 areas: coastal, east of the Cascades, and disaster recovery areas. And if you look at the scoring rubric, it provides a lot more guidance of what falls in those areas. And then we have 25 million set aside for these funds. So we have to get a magic combination of projects that don't exceed 25 million. So that's our project balancing criteria. And if we don't, if it's still unclear which projects we should fund, based off of applying this project balancing criteria, we have a few other priorities that will apply to the set of projects. And so one is prioritizing the composition of projects that leads to the greatest number of units funded. The second rung is prioritizing the composition of projects with the greatest number of units and a culturally specific developer. And then last, all those 2, plus the highest combined score in cost effectiveness and time savings. So a lot of layers there. We won't apply this other layer of criteria unless it's totally unclear to us how to fund the project. So this is just so that there's a lot of transparency in how OHCS is making our decisions after you submit your applications. And we hope that that helps you understand how your responses will be treated once you press submit. So I'll pass it back to you, Britt.
Thank you. Okay, before we get into your questions, I'm sure you've got lots. We have a few things that we want to mention, some FAQs that we've received, because this is a cross-divisional effort for us as well. A lot of this is, some of this, not all, a little bit of this is new for us. So there's been a lot of frequently asked questions that we've had internally, and there's a lot of visibility on this cohort. This cohort of projects, this portfolio of projects, as Talia explained, will be a showcase. So the portfolio balancing piece of this will be important because media, leadership, legislators will be looking to this portfolio, this cohort of projects as sort of proof of concept. So that's that piece of that. That's why no more than 5 projects we believe is established with this set aside, because they want to demonstrate a display of a myriad of unique projects. Factory produced housing projects are already eligible for our resources. So this set aside is sort of a signal and a step toward sort of kickstarting demand. But we want you to know, if you walk away with nothing else, if you don't receive the set aside, please don't give up. As we get resources replenished, please go for it in the sort of standard processes. Projects that, let's see, Oh, okay, sorry. Manufactured housing is eligible for the set aside. We've received this question a lot internally as well. So we wanted to make sure that it was clear for all of the potential applicants that yes, manufactured housing is eligible. With that, I will zip it and we will open for Q&A. Just to keep this orderly, my ask is that you raise your hand or put your message in the chat. Again, if we don't get to your question today, get it in the chat. We will put up some frequently asked questions into our on our webpage. So I'm going to stop sharing for the time being so that we can see each other and we can start questions. So please raise your hand and I will call on you and we will get started. We have about 20 minutes. Yes, Stuart, please. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Thank you. Thank you, Stuart, for being
Oh, there.
There it is.
Thanks. Thanks, Britt, and everybody, Talia, for walking us all through this. It's great. So this is a pretty written response. I'm not hearing about drawings, renderings and that kind of thing. Is this mostly to fill out the spreadsheets and do some great writing? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yep, that will all come when the project is selected. We'll ask for a lot more detail, but yeah, we want to see some basic information about your project, but you don't need to send us the whole shebang of information.
Okay, I'll hold the shebang. Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, Marge, please go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. That was really great to walk us through all of that. My question is, are there any limitations on who we can partner with? For instance, could a co-applicant be a First Nation group or a municipality?
Great question. And I think that will vary depending on whether it's a rental or homeownership project. For homeownership, they have to be an applicable covenant holder, which means a public entity. For rental, it could be a for-profit or public entity. So that's just one distinction. For LIFT, another distinction is that the project for both rental and homeownership, the project has to be on Oregon land, which has been it's been a tripping point for us, including tribal entities in funding. So we can't fund projects on tribal land because it's sovereign land, not Oregon land, but we can fund a tribal project that isn't on sovereign land. So, and tribal entities are eligible for funding. So, and other, public housing agencies are eligible. So if you have a specific entity in mind and you're not sure, feel free to reach out. But
Okay.
yeah, hopefully that answers.
And then I just had one other thing. When I've started the workbook, and when I clicked on one of the areas, what popped up was this table that showed rental subsidy limits for new construction. And it had, 200,000, all the different rental subsidies. Is that funding in addition to this program? Could you apply for that funding in addition to this funding? Could that be another source?
No, those subsidy limits on the general information page in the workbook show you what you can apply for. So
Okay.
that helps you calculate what your request is going to be.
Got it. Okay, got it. Thank you.
My mistake, Sarah, please go ahead. We'll take Sarah Fisher's question and then we'll do a chat question, and then Steve, you will be Steve, you'll be next after that. Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah, you there? We'll come back to you, Sarah. Let's take the Kevin question. If a homeownership or ARH project is an intake or impact assessment, how will the normal OHCS funding process and this funding process affect each other if a project moves forward, and how it is funded?
Yeah, so great question. We urge you to keep moving forward with your application in the ORCA or homeownership NOFA, which will keep you in the running if you're not funded through the factory produced housing set aside. So keep doing both processes concurrently. If you are funded through the set aside, that will move you out of the kind of mainstream line, whether it's ORCA or the NOFA, and that will just free up space for the next project in line to get funding. Does that answer your question, Kevin? Feel free to clarify if not. Okay, cool.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, Sarah, are you back? Okay, we're going to go to Steve. Steve, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Well, Kevin's question was the same as my question, so thanks, Kevin. And I have another one. Can you speak a little bit more about how you're defining project readiness? If like there's site control, those kinds of things, but what about permitting? Do you have criteria? Could you help us understand that?
Yeah, maybe we'll pull up Britt, will you go back to the development schedule? Basically, we want to see that your project will be ready to close. One key piece is attesting that you'll be able to close on the lift loan by February 2027. So you'll get the green light if you're selected to start going through the ORCA or NOFA if you haven't yet, or maybe you're just continuing as you were. And then you have to have everything in place and have your documents executed by February 2027. So we want to make sure that shows on your application. We want to make sure that you'll be able to complete the LIFT project within 36 months of receiving a reservation of funds, which we don't expect to be a major issue for factory produced housing. We've heard from you all that you're ready to exceed those timelines. We aren't requiring that you have permitting in place, but we want to see that you have a plan for permit submission that is realistic with your timelines. So really, we're looking at this development schedule and making sure that it seems realistic given basically the closing timeline and the 36-month reservation time completion timeline.
Thanks, Talia. That helped.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Sarah, yes, we can't hear you. I'm so sorry, but your question, you want to clarify that with 3 to 5 total projects funded, the application acceptance rate is likely to be exceptionally competitive, right?
We don't know how many applicants are coming in for this. That's a tricky thing I don't envy that you all have to game that out. So we're not sure how competitive it will be.
Thank you, Sarah. Matt Edlin, should a project that has the ability to be phased apply for the full project or just one phase given or note the ability to phase given the amount of fund available? So it sounds like, sorry, Talia, that probably please go ahead.
Sure. I think that we aren't going to consider funding a project for less than it has listed. So put the amount that the project costs, whether you intend to do it as phased or not. But I think you can take into account when making that decision that there's a total of 25 million, where it's very unlikely that we would fund a project for 24 million or 23 million because we have this mandate to fund 3 projects. So that doesn't mean that all the funding is going to be distributed equally. We're not trying to fund, $7 million projects across the board or $5 million projects. You don't have to stick to any specific metric, but yeah, I would say you kind of have to figure out what makes sense for you to put forward, and we're not going to do partial. We're not going to go back to you and say, can we fund you for less? And I know sometimes OHCS has a history of doing that, and it hasn't necessarily worked. So we're going to try to fully fund projects with the requests that they ask for.
Thanks, Talia. Okay, so I missed a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to do one chat question and then Juliana will go to you. This is from Lynn Williams. Can the funds be used for replacement of manufactured homes in agency-owned parks?
Yes. They have to, no, they cannot be used for replacement. They can be used for infill of empty spaces that aren't being used, but they cannot be used for replacement, unfortunately.
Thank you. Juliana, please go ahead. And
So my
Steve, I'm sorry, Juliana, just 1 second.
Go ahead.
Steve, I'm gonna put your hand down if that's okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Juliana.
So my question is, I heard that if you have some homes for sale, some for rental, you do two separate applications. Is that the case if they're on the same site? Would they be considered as one project so that the construction schedule, all the costs and everything associated with both the construction of the project feasible? Or because I'm understanding you're not phasing, right? So how does that work?
Yeah, let us get back to everybody about that. I know that, ultimately OHCS doesn't really have a pathway for intaking a mixed homeownership and rental project. So if selected, that project would have to bifurcate its application process, successfully make it through the homeownership development NOFA, successfully make it through the ORCA. So a little, like, we apologize, that would be a pain for you for one project. But we just have different processes. I think we probably could move forward with accepting one factory produced housing selection template for both of them, but let us follow up. If you could send us maybe a little more information, and I'll put the email to send, and we can follow up, and we can also post that answer to our website as well. Are there
And who
other
do
folks that are, oh, sorry.
Who do I send the email to?
Yeah, let me put it in the chat.
Okay.
Are there other folks that are considering something like that? Okay, good to know.
Also, is this funding source have any federal regulations on it, or is it all state?
It's all state funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is our state. It's funded through LIFT, which is Article 11Q bonds, which are state infrastructure bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Talia. Okay, next question from Kevin Peters. If a project is 3 buildings and all 3 have been submitted per the ARH processes, I'm assuming that means ORCA, can we apply to have 1 or 2 buildings on this set aside?
Good question. I think we need to see that all sources are feasible, and if it's not feasible, that, like, if you're really far in line, you've already submitted for the full project on the ORCA waitlist, and it's not likely that the timing of that funding will match our timing, then um, we would like to see that the project can be fully funded within our timeline. I'm hearing from our LIFT homeownership specialist, Garrick, that maybe you could reach out and we can get back to you with a specific answer about that one. If I
Great.
didn't fully give you insight into your question.
Thank you. Okay, next one. If a rental, I'm sorry. I think Jesse's question, Jesse Ledesma, I think the question here is one that we've had before. If a rental project is awarded the set aside, can we start the ORCA processes following the award? It doesn't need to be before. So I think this is a similar question, but probably another good one to reemphasize.
Yeah, it does not need to have been started before. We are, anyone is welcome to have a go at this selection process. So you can be pretty far along in the ORCA, or you can be totally new to it. So this selection will, if you're new, you'll have to start from the beginning from the ORCA. If you're already entrenched in it, it will be a quicker pathway to the funding reservation. But
Thanks,
we're
Talia.
agnostic of where you are in that process.
Okay, another good one from Marge. Can you close and receive funds in 2026 if your project is ready to go?
Totally, we'd love that.
Okay, I'm just double checking. We've got a scattered sites question, Talia. Would scattered sites, 2 different sites on one application be acceptable? I think you kind of answered this, but that might be another good one to reemphasize.
Yeah, and I think Garrick may be on the call. Garrick is on the call too. I think OHCS has, I think our rental scattered site and homeownership scattered site policies may be a little different for, so a scattered site application is acceptable. We, maybe Garrick can put the policies for rental in the chat and I can put the criteria for homeownership in the chat to help you assess whether your application is acceptable.
And then, I think our timing is perfect. We've got just one more question. I might need Derek's help with this, though. I'm not totally sure I'm following. The framework supporting your proposed project must comply with all LIFT requirements. Have you considered the implications for readiness if LIFT is your sole source of funding? So Derek, do you mind saying more here? It is the sole source of funding, by the way. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so like, is there points considered like an advantage in your application if your project is only needing LIFT funding to do your project instead of, say, LIFT and, say, 2 or 3 other capital stacks or programs that you're trying to combine to lift your project, if that makes sense? Is there consideration like higher points given to your application if you're only asking for LIFT dollars?
Oh, yeah. No, we're not taking that into account. We are we're looking at your sources and uses. We want to see that your sources are feasible. And, if you are requesting a lot of other OHCS funding that we know is not available, then that you wouldn't meet our minimum thresholds. But we're not taking into account like the type of funds in your capital stack. Does that answer your question? We just want to know that your overall budget balances the high level budget. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Talia. Thanks, everybody. Your questions were amazing. We will follow up and get some of these posted to the website, including the slides and this presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Caroline to close us out with some additional resources. But thank you so much. Okay, let's see. Caroline, take it away.
Thank you, Britt. We just have some sources linked here. So we've got our webpage, which Britt already dropped in our chat and will be available with these slides as well as our rubric. That rubric has a ton of things linked within the rubric itself for additional guidance and support. Really encourage y'all to explore that document. And then finally, we've got our technical assistance staff. We've got an email for our home ownership folks, an email for our rental folks. Please reach out with any questions or any support needed. And just a final reminder that this is due by April 6th. So please reach out before then if you've got questions or any hiccups with application things. Thank you so much. And it was great to see you all and engage in this space.
We're excited to see the applications. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Yes,
you.
can't wait.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to stop the recording, but